rose while sales stagnated. Some of this is due to a consumer shift from pandemic-era online shopping to frequenting more brick-and-mortar stores. But the problem for FedEx is global. Shipping declines were most acute in Asia and Europe, where FedEx brought in about $500 million less than forecast. In China, there were additional COVID lockdowns that stalled factories and businesses. Europe has been dealing with skyrocketing energy costs brought on by Russia's war in Ukraine, as well as sharply rising inflation. FedEx says it will close 90 storefronts and take other cost-cutting measures to respond to the challenges. I'm Nova Safo for Marketplace.
And the car service Uber is trying to lock down its computer systems after an apparent hacker sent a message in the company's internal Slack channel claiming they'd gotten widespread access to Uber's systems, perhaps the whole kit and caboodle. It's not clear what the hacker wants out of this. Uber says it's working with law enforcement. In New York, I'm David Brancaccio. This is the Marketplace Morning Report. From APM, American Public Media.
At ViStar Credit Union, we believe in helping members reach their financial goals and building stronger communities. It's why we offer our members better rates and give back to the places we call home. ViStar Credit Union. Visit vistarcu.org/join.
Wayne Hogan of the Terrell Hogan Law Firm.
I'm Wayne Hogan. It's the #1 killer of teens. One text or call can wreck it all. Let's put an end to distracted driving.
Learn more at waynehogan.law.
North Florida TPO, proud sponsor of WJCT's First Coast Connect, bringing to the community innovation in transportation planning, commuter services, clean fuels, and intelligent transportation systems. More at North Florida TPO.
Opinions expressed on the Friday Media Roundtable are those of our panelists and do not necessarily reflect the views of WJCT News.
It's the biggest stories from the week. I'm Melissa Ross, and just ahead this hour on First Coast Connect, all the week's top stories with our Friday Roundtable. As the candidates for Duval Sheriff meet in a forum right here in our studios, a new report documents the rise of hate in Florida and Duval County. And lots of events all around town. We'll tell you what's happening. It's all ahead, plus the 10th season of the Florida Chamber Music Project and our own Jacksonville Music Experience, or JME. Keep listening. It's all coming your way right after this news.
It's now 9:01. This is WJCT News 89.9 Jacksonville. Jurors deliberated less than 3 hours in acquitting former Clay County Sheriff Darrell Daniels of all charges. Daniels was found not guilty yesterday on charges of lying to investigators and destroying evidence of his extramarital relationship during the investigation. The verdict came after 3 days of testimony from prosecution witnesses. The defense called no witnesses. Daniels was arrested in August 2020. Governor Ron DeSantis removed him from office and appointed then recently elected Sheriff Michelle Cook to begin her term early. You can climb aboard Jules Verne's Nautilus submarine at the Museum of Science and History this weekend and explore the ocean's depths. Mosh's new exhibit, Voyage to the Deep, takes visitors inside the 1870 Jules Verne novel, 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, with a model of the book's famous submarine. Anthony Mortimer, the head of exhibits and education at Mosh, says the museum has always ventured into interesting history, but rarely historical science fiction.
It's a great opportunity for us not only to provide an entertaining look at the world of submarines and under the ocean, but also a chance to really engage our visitors in some classic literature if they've never read the book or if it's been a long time like it was for me.
Most of the exhibit's interactive activities are geared to children and families, and that includes the Submarine Pilot Simulator. Voyage opens to the public Saturday and runs through January 8th. Our temperature's at 78 degrees now, a 30% chance of showers and thunderstorms mainly after 2 this afternoon. Partly sunny, upper 80s, windy from the northeast. A low of 74 overnight here in northeast Florida.
The candidates for Duval Sheriff square off in a forum at WJCT Studios. Hate on the rise in Florida, and especially in Duval County. And sex ed, or critics say the lack of it, in local schools. Some of these stories making headlines this week. Good Friday morning. We are live from Studio 5. I'm Melissa Ross, and this is First Coast Connect. Thanks for listening. Just ahead, all the top stories of the week with our Friday Roundtable. Listen live on the radio or watch us right now on Facebook and YouTube. Then later, the Florida Chamber Music Project debuts new work. Plus, we take a listen to all the great local artists inside our own JME, the Jacksonville Music Experience. But first, it's Friday, and we're so pleased to have a fabulous foursome to discuss a very busy news week once again as we welcome Claire Goforth of the Daily Dot. Hey, Claire. Good morning. Regular contributor Fred Matthews. Hi, Fred.
Good morning, Melissa.
Former City Council President Jack Webb, now a regular contributor. Hey, Jack.
Melissa, good morning. How are you? How are you this morning?
Doing well. And rounding out our panel, Raymond Troncoso of WJCT News. Good morning.
Good morning.
All right, folks, lots to talk about this week and already getting your calls. Join us. 549-2937. Emails to First Coast Connect at WJCT.org. Tweets to @MelissaInJax. And our Facebook page, always open. Let's begin with our top story. Democratic Sheriff candidate Lakeisha Burton did nothing wrong when she told supporters they could donate the maximum amount to her campaign a second time. This according to the Florida Department of State. The advice from the State Department clarifies a dispute in the hotly contested race between Burton and Republican T.K. Waters. They were the top two finishers in a special election in August to replace the departed Sheriff Mike Williams. They've sparred about Burton's fundraising as well as T.K. Waters' residency. That became an issue after Sheriff Williams had to resign this year when it was discovered he wasn't even living in Duval County. Now, Burton and T.K. Waters squared off here at WJCT last night in a forum sponsored by our own Jax Today and the Jacksonville Bar Association. Let's listen to the two candidates, beginning with T.K. Waters during last night's forum here at WJCT Studios.
I'm not Mike Williams. I'm a completely different guy. I'm not Ron DeSantis. I'm not any other sheriff. I'm T.K. Waters. And I'm here to serve this community because I love it. Period. That's it. That's where it stops for me.
Lakeisha Burton, for her part, says the voters are ready for a change when it comes to law enforcement.
I've been talking about changing a culture of the police department from the inside out. We need a sheriff who's not going to lead from the lens of a political lens or a personal lens, but from the lens of the law and what's right for the people.
549-2937 as we begin the Friday Roundtable with a closer look at the sheriff's race. Raymond Troncoso, let's start with you. The Republicans supporting T.K. Waters had accused Burton of fundraising irregularities. You looked into that?
Yeah, so there's actually a couple complaints that they've made. A few of them are still being investigated by the Florida Elections Commission, but one of the first ones they made, and the one that they kind of more strongly tied to her campaign when asking her to actually drop out of the race, was this idea that she had illegally asked for donors who had maxed out, which means they donated $1,000 to her campaign for the 2023 sheriff race, to donate the maximum again when the special election was called. They said, she was double dipping. That's not allowed. But the Department of State basically came out and said, these count as separate elections, even though it's for the same position. So a special election that happens, 6 months earlier, that means that the cap basically resets. The complaint that they're still making is that she may have commingled the funds, and that's something that's still being looked at by the Florida Election Commission.
The Duval GOP reached out to you. We have some sound from local spokesperson Dean Black. Here he is.
Yes, it would appear that the Department of State was asked the wrong question. There are two questions at issue here. Did Lakeisha Burton have to return money because of how she handled the two accounts? And the answer appears to be yes, and the Burton campaign has refused to answer this question. But then, more importantly, the second question is, what about the hundreds of thousands of dollars that Lakeisha Burton is alleged to have illegally used from her political committee? Once again, the Burton campaign refused to answer these allegations. And Duval County voters deserve to know if their would-be sheriff conducted potentially illegal campaign activity. Until she answers these potential violations, I continue to call on Lakeisha Burton to withdraw from the race.
5492937. Claire Goforth, the Burton campaign laughed off the comments made by the Duval GOP and said that they show increasing desperation. And she also issued a statement saying TK Waters needs to focus on making this a safer city from wherever he's living now. She was hearkening back to a scandal involving Waters when his residency, whether he actually is voting in the house that he's domiciled, whether he is skirting the law when it comes to voting and residency issues. Of course, that plagued the former sheriff, Mike Williams. He had to leave office early because it was discovered he wasn't even living in Duval County. As sheriff, he's legally required to do so. That's the whole reason we're having this election on a shortened time frame to begin with.
Yes, TK Waters certainly was on notice that residency is an issue in this election due to Mike Williams being basically forced to resign from the residency issue. I do find it interesting that this race is now focusing on things that are peripheral to actually the job of being sheriff. We're seeing mudslinging, we're seeing, these claims going back and forth. But bottom line is what Duval County voters are looking for is someone who is going to address the very serious issues involving crime in the city and how our sheriff's force, which takes half of the city budget every year, is spending that money, whether or not it's making us safer, whether or not officers are acting with impunity. These questions that I think matter most, and by distracting from those with this mudslinging, it's just sort of turning it into kind of just a circus, unfortunately.
5492937. Let's go to our former office holder, former city council pres, Jack Webb. Jack, these candidates are running up against the obstacle of running in an off-year cycle, trying to get voters' attention. As I mentioned, it's on a shortened time frame due to Williams having to leave office early. And as Claire pointed out, of course, public safety is the number one concern most voters say they have, along with economic concerns. So how do you see this race shaking out?
I think it's time. I think the community is ready to try something different. That's just my personal feeling. I heard Miss Burton's comments about culture, and I kind of smiled. Apparently, she read my column from Jack's Today yesterday, and when that's exactly what I was talking about. That is, there is a sense of, it's what's the old expression? The definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result, and that seems to be what we're faced here as a community. I don't just even think it's just Jacksonville. I think it's a shift around the country that you're seeing. People just want to try something different, and I think that Dean Black recognizes that, and this is just an attempt by the Republican Executive Committee chair to knock her off her game. The polls must be a little bit intimidating, or else he would not be out there doing what he's doing. But I'll say this with regards to any investigation, not only Department of State say that she was fine, but the Republican of all Republicans in Duval County, Jerry Holland, who concurred. So I'll just leave it at that this is an attempt to knock her off her game. And what she needs to do down the stretch is focus on those issues, keep getting her message out. It'll be an interesting evening the night of the election.
Fred Matthews, last night here at our WJCT studios, Lakeisha Burton accused TK Waters of failing to bring down crime numbers in a leadership position he held within JSO. Waters shot back that Burton had come to him for advice about making the districts she was responsible for safer. Your thoughts?
Well, at least there was some discussion about actual crime prevention and how to combat crime during last night's debate. Look, when we have had discussions with both candidates, particularly T.K. Waters, about lowering crime, we didn't really get anything new from him other than probably a different look at stats and that sort of thing. And of course, from the Burton campaign, we've got a steady barrage of how much crime was lowered in the Arlington district that she last supervised. Whereas, again, with the Waters campaign, he's been the chief spokesman over the last 2 years. At every major crime scene, he was there to tell us what was happening and what we were going to hear or not going to hear in time. So really, it just comes down to sort of a face-off there between the two of them, because neither one of them was in charge totally of lowering crime throughout the city. But at least there was some discussion about whose stats were better. And Burton has had stats that she can really talk about and publicize, whereas Waters has had to depend on the overall look of the sheriff's office, going from crime scene to crime scene. So nothing really new to see there.
If you're just tuning in, it's our Friday Media Roundtable. Join us at 549-2937. Raymond Troncoso, what else happened at the forum last night? We had a packed house here, by the way, to see these two candidates.
One thing that they talked about that I thought was interesting was this idea of an adult civil citation program. Now, this is something that the previous sheriff, Mike Williams, had actually irked a lot of people about because he had initially given commitments in 2021 about looking into this. The state attorney, Melissa Nelson, she actually gave her commitment that, hey, if JSO goes for this, I'm all for it. I think it's a good idea. Other counties do it. But Mike Williams avoided the interfaith organization I Care for over a year, refused to meet with them to talk about this after initially giving a commitment. And when he finally did meet with them, he basically said, despite the fact that JSO has, a third of the city's budget, they didn't have the infrastructure to put into place. Lakeisha came out in favor of it last night. And TK Water, she came out in favor of it for first-time misdemeanor offenders. So this civil citation program would basically supersede an arrest, let someone waive.
Is that a new position for her? Or I'm not sure about that, but go ahead.
I'm not sure if it's a new position. I'm not sure if she's been asked about it before.
Okay.
But it was brought up because it was a big issue with the previous sheriff. TK Waters said that he wasn't in favor of it, but even that's kind of a different position. He said he's not Mike Williams, and he showed that by coming out strongly against it instead of avoiding the question entirely.
549-2937. Something neither of these candidates support, Claire, is an independent civilian review board particularly for police-involved shootings. The one candidate in the race that did support that, Tony Cummings, has dropped out and is endorsing Burton.
Yeah, I mean, the citizens review boards they have a lot of support in the public. They will take an independent look at police-involved shootings, which many people perceive police are essentially given a pass in a shooting. Now, legislatively, the law is very much on officer sides. They have wide leeway to decide to use deadly force. But by having an independent body do oversight, that does provide a different level of accountability. There are other large jurisdictions around the country that use these, and I have never heard any issues where officers are being charged with crimes that there really wasn't clear evidence that they should be charged. It's about accountability when it comes to the police. And for too long, in many voters' minds, the police have not been held accountable.
Certainly the advent of the iPhone has started to make this so much more of an issue when people can roll video on altercations that sometimes lead to death between police and civilians. And so, Jack Webb, in the wake of the death of George Floyd in Minneapolis, Jacksonville saw large criminal justice reform and Black Lives Matter protests, so large, so loud, that we saw the mayor of Jacksonville, Lenny Curry, remove the statue of the Confederate soldier in downtown. It was called Hemming Park. Now it's James Weldon Johnson Park. The Confederacy name was removed in favor of an African-American citizen of Jacksonville. The most amazing person this city has likely ever produced. It was named after an African-American leader. And, the rest of the Confederate monuments have yet to come down in this city, which remains a sore point for many voters. But I think that we need to go back to that summer of protests to kind of get a sense of the fact that there is a groundswell of frustration with police civilian interactions, not just here in Jacksonville, but all over the country. These candidates were asked about that last night. I hope people did have the chance to watch the video stream on Facebook and YouTube. It was hosted by Jax Today's Rick Anderson, because you did get the chance to see where these candidates are on this issue, which so many people care about. Jack.
Yeah, the question of accountability, again, a lot of interrelated issues here. Like, for example, the transparency, and I guess it all comes down to transparency operations, transparency of accountability, all of this. I mean, again, to the extent you talk about technology, absolutely. Again, it's just a different age. I mean, to the extent that 20 years ago or even 10 years ago, the courts, judges, the prosecutors were dependent upon and heavily reliant upon a police report that was prepared after extensive training, I might add, as to proper buzzwords and phrases, a skewed police report. That's no longer the case. You've got objective evidence that sometimes can be manipulated either way. It has to be taken in total context. But so there's that. The world has changed. It's been a huge draconian shift within the last 5 years or so. And again, we talk about accountability as far as just the manner in which the JSO interacts and what is its proper role in consolidated government, and who does it account, who is it responsible to, or who is it account to, all of these issues. And again, I think that's why the gloves came off yesterday, and these two candidates are trying to distinguish themselves, and Ms. Burton being a candidate of change, whereas T.K. Waters, I mean, for better or worse, I mean, he is the guy who is being endorsed by the establishment, the FOP, and the outgoing sheriff. So, as I say, I think it's going to be an interesting election night.
Yeah. Fred, can Lakeisha Burton's I think we've lost Fred for a second. We'll try to get him back. But hold that thought, folks. It's our Friday Media Roundtable, 549-2937. We'll get back to that in a bit as we reconnect Fred. But also making headlines this week, a new report on extremism and anti-Semitism in Florida finds the state is home to an extensive and interconnected network of white supremacists and other far-right extremists, including groups operating, yes, right here in North Florida. This detailed report from the Anti-Defamation League identifies several extremist groups with ties to Duval County. They include NatSoc Florida, that's an acronym for National Socialism. Basically, they're a neo-Nazi group. The White Supremacist Patriot Front and others. Are you concerned about the rise of hate crimes and anti-Semitism in Florida? There were Nazis flying flags at the overpass along Emerson and I-95 just the other day. A lot of people posted those photos on social media. Give us a call, 549-2937. Raymond Troncoso, the Anti-Defamation League, says a lot of this is being spurred on by conspiracy theories and lies that are being propagated by politicians and other prominent people in America.
Yeah, well, extremist groups always try to co-opt the message of the political party that's closest to them to try to be more appealing to a mainstream audience. So we saw that with some of these hate groups where they were protesting outside restaurants and calling them groomers, kind of borrowing language that's been used by the staff of our governor, referring to people who oppose some of his policies on, transgender care and related LGBTQ issues. They kind of co-opted that to say, hey, look, you hate groomers, we hate groomers, we're on your side. So it's not unusual to see that sort of thing where they're going to hop on kind of more mainstream conspiracy theories to make their own hateful views more palatable to a conservative audience that may not actually hold those views themselves.
Mm-hmm. Claire Goforth, you've been reporting in the Daily Dot about this. In a moment, I want to ask you about your new story that a man involved with a lot of campaign financing for local races is actually a pro-Confederacy white supremacist, as you discovered. But first, What about these groups in general and their prominence in our area and throughout the state?
I was sadly unsurprised by the ADL's report. Extremism has a very strong foothold in Florida, and Florida has a history of extremism, but most alarming is that it's rising from an already alarming point. What Raymond alluded to is that we don't really see very strong condemnation of these groups by Republican officials and who are more closely aligned with these individuals. Now, maybe that's the individuals involved in these groups who perceive that, but without really strongly coming out against them, they give them this sort of permission to continue. And what we see, a lot of this organizing takes place online. The radicalization takes place online, and then it spills into the real world, such as that anti-Semitic banner that we saw flying over Emerson recently at 95. These groups, they do a lot of things to attract new members and to capitalize on disaffected youth and to recruit people. Flying a banner is certainly a hateful thing to do, but what these groups can do and what we have seen previously is they can inspire very serious acts of violence. It is widely known that the mass shooter Dylan Roof was actually radicalized by white supremacist websites while having no interaction with those groups. So while flying a banner is a hateful act, it can inspire an actual mass casualty event.
That's right. Fred Matthews, this kind of hateful extremism is deadly, and we've seen that over and over again.
Well, we have. And the unfortunate part about this, Melissa, is that it has metastasized, I think is the correct right word. I receive a tremendous amount of email from email bloggers, which is a primary way to get the word out across the nation, who have established their own network of information to get it up and down the track, to let people know everything about their chief argument these days is about the open borders that the U.S. has, that they claim that is so rampant now, that's all over everywhere, and the fact that the jobs will be taken away from them, and of course the major argument that's everywhere is that Caucasian Americans, Anglo-Americans will soon be a minority in this country, and we need to take steps to stop the alien hordes from coming over the borders, and we need to do whatever we can to stop this from going on. And believe it or not, the attack against Jewish Americans has become somewhat of a side issue, but they are, of course, still blamed for having so much money and contacts that feeds the liberal activity that is going on. And of course, there's nothing that President Biden can ever do right with this group of Americans to make things right. It's an ugly situation. And of course, when you have governors of Texas and Florida doing what they did, doing what our governor did this week, and doing what Texas governor has been doing, it feeds right into the narrative. We're not going to have those people here. We're no longer welcoming here in America. We're going to send them someplace else rather than have them hang around with us and taking our jobs and eventually registering and voting Democratic.
Let's talk about that for a minute. Jack Webb, Governor DeSantis apparently coordinated with Texas Governor Abbott to send 2 plane loads of migrants escaping persecution and violence in Venezuela. They were taken up to Martha's Vineyard, Massachusetts. And up there, people on that island are sheltering and feeding the migrants. This has caused a firestorm around the country, and we will be discussing it at more length today at noon on our statewide program, the Florida Roundup. What was your reaction?
Melissa, there's there's a conflation, excuse me, is the word. It's early. Conflation of issues here. On the one hand, I agree with Fred that, this hatred has metastasized, and the absence of condemnation by Republican leadership is just inexcusable. Inexcusable. I remember Jim King used to tell me all the time that it was the role of a Republican to be the adult in the room. They're no longer the adult in the room. They're not telling these young idiots that this is inappropriate behavior. You can believe what you believe, but knock it off. This is not the way we live in a pluralistic society. Please, let's move on here. Get right, find God, do something. Just don't know what to tell you, but it's just wrong. Call it out for what it is. But that said, the whole issue, I don't like the use of human beings as political stunt dummies. The fact that Abbott and DeSantis are using these people for political purposes, I find disgusting as well. But I don't think it's about jobs. I think it's about people. I think it's about a seeming arrogance of Washington saying, all right, we're going to open these borders, or not open the borders, but we're going to relocate people to your state, but we're not going to help you financially. It's easy to sit in a private club in Martha's Vineyard and not be impacted by what's happening in these border communities or in these red states that are bearing the brunt of this. So, and I got to tell you, politically, it's working for him. I'm in New York right now, and we'll get to this on the lightning round. But these people in New York, as I said before, the Democrat fire is burning out up here, and people are just hungry for a change. And I'm not supportive of that change. I'm just calling it for what it is. But that said, Claire's article was really interesting with this McGehee guy. Is just further evidence of how entrenched some of these right-wing reactionaries are in just everyday society, and that's an alarming reality as well.
We'll get to that in a minute, but first, let's go to a few calls. Jim in Jacksonville. Hi, Jim. Good morning.
Yes, I have a question that's probably best put to Claire Goforth, who's become like an expert now on the right-wing insurgency. And my question is, does she think that Northeast Florida has become the central command for the American Taliban?
Claire, go forth. That's a kind of a loaded question, but go ahead and answer it.
Well, thank you for calling me an expert. I know there are many people that operate in this space who I look up to, who I would consider far more knowledgeable than I am. But I have spent several years reporting on far-right extremism and hate groups. And Northeast Florida is definitely a stronghold. I don't know if you're talking Florida-wide, if it's the center of it, because really the center of the state is where you see a bit more of this and sort of like that rural expanse in between here and Tallahassee. But Northeast Florida does have an alarming number of extremists. I mean, it is surprising to me at times. I'll be reporting on a story that is really of national interest, and then next thing you know, it's somebody in my own backyard that I stumble upon.
And let's briefly explain that the story you reported on, a guy in our area who was offering up fundraising software to a number of candidates in our area and office holders, has been outed as a white supremacist.
Yes, the company is called Adjutant Workshop, and the owner is Stephen Clay McGehee. This company has been around since 1996, and it has been providing software to campaigns and PACs across the state, and continuing to do so to present day. Throughout that entire time, they say they were the first to provide such software. I found it extremely surprising when I looked into Mr. McGehee's history online. He runs very openly white supremacist websites and has done so since at least 2007. He has a verified Gab account on which he expresses some of the most abhorrent views that you could imagine. Very anti-Semitic, very racist, very misogynistic. And yet all of these campaigns and candidates have been using him, some of them unwittingly, but certainly. We see them on both sides of the aisle, though primarily Republicans, to be honest. honest. But I did speak with someone who was very knowledgeable about how campaign finance works, and they said, well, many of these campaigns may not know of Mr. McGahee's views, which are very easy to find. You can Google him and come up with his websites. Some of them certainly do. So that is why I put the question to Secretary of State Cord Byrd, who used his software, because he's the state's senior election official. If anyone should really know about this man's history, arguably, although he hasn't been in the Secretary of State very long, it should be the person who's running elections in Florida, the chief elections officer. And he did claim that he did not know of the abhorrent views. But, this just tells you how entrenched and how maybe some campaigns are turning a blind eye, and certainly some of them actually are endorsing these views tacitly by being involved with them on a business level.
549-2937. Eric in Jacksonville. Hey, Eric, good morning to you. Go ahead.
Yeah, good morning. About the Martha's Vineyard thing.
Mm-hmm.
Read the Times-Union newspaper this morning, and a whole lot of column inches devoted to that story. And all these obscure Democratic representatives are featured in that thing, but not one mention of Charlie Baker, relatively reasonable.
The governor of Massachusetts?
Republican governor.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And, it just underscores, for me anyway, it's a public relations exercise. It's a big show being put on, and Massachusetts got a pretty good history of dealing with immigration, and I don't know, it's just more of the same.
Thanks, Eric. We still have to find out, Raymond, how the governor of Florida is able to take credit for migrants who were coming in via Texas. And that has yet to be reported out, actually.
It's still being investigated. Something I want to know earlier, the governor of Texas actually was not involved. His office actually said on Wednesday that they were not involved with this. So the only state that has taken credit for this exercise has been Florida. Abbott has not claimed credit for this at all. They said that they're unaware. Local officials in San Antonio said that they're unaware. There's a lot of mystery surrounding this. There was someone with an alias, Perla, who apparently was recruiting these migrants with the idea that they're actually going to Boston for a work program that was federally funded. Some reporting in the Washington Post and the New York Times has shown flyers that some of these migrants were handed out that basically falsely told them that they would be going to Boston for these work programs. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of mystery surrounding this whole event, and it's unclear if DeSantis knew what he was claiming credit for, because there's a lot of weird things going on that you would send someone to Texas to take people to Martha's Vineyard to prevent them from getting to Florida. It's really roundabout.
Doris is on the line. Hi, Doris. How are you? Go ahead. Thanks for calling. Go ahead, Doris.
Can you hear me?
Yeah. Oh, it's not Doris. Is your name Doris or something else? Go ahead.
Yeah, that's my wife's name.
Oh, there we go.
Charlie.
Hey, Charlie, go ahead.
I'm Charlie calling from the beach. And I just wanted to mention something. I understand what you guys are talking about, and it's very relevant, but I want to talk about it from a micro and a macro perspective. The micro perspective, that's what you're talking about, discrimination, things that aren't happening in various things, and individuals that are doing crazy things. But from a macro perspective, I guess I want to take Northeast Florida and be grateful. We're going to have a black sheriff. We've had black mayors. My city councilman has been black. So from a macro perspective, could you say that we're doing pretty well?
Thanks for that. Let's go to Fred Matthews. Fred, when we get back to this report from the Anti-Defamation League, it focuses on hate and extremism and anti-Semitism. When you talk to experts on anti-Semitism, they will often say that if you see a spike in anti-Semitism, that's sort of a canary in the coal mine, that means lots of other groups should be prepared to be facing possible incidents of hate and violence. But could you respond to Charlie's call as well?
Well, Jacksonville is the big city here in Northeast Florida. It always has been for quite some time. So, we're not we're probably not the best example for the anti-Semites to show that that things are going their way, because again, as you pointed out, and we've talked about quite some time here, the next sheriff of Duval County is going to be African Americans, and it's a bit of a query as to why that worked out that way. The only Anglo that was in the race, Officer Nemeth, I think was his name, pulled out early on. But so Jacksonville's probably not the best example for them to show. But then again, it is, because it also feeds into the narrative to an extent that white people are becoming less than, for those who really are worried about being less than. And this is yet another example of being less than. Now, having given that particular example of it, when I talked with one of the candidates for sheriff, his reply as to why he was a Republican, and I think you've heard it, he says, well, they're where I am. The Democratic Party, left me, and they don't represent what I believe. The Republican Party does. And that's the conundrum that you're in, is that you do have people on both sides of the color line who have strong beliefs as to where they should be, and this is no different. But when you leave out of Jacksonville and you travel down 301, you take that left turn on State Road 100 and start going deeper into Florida off of the main highways, that's when you begin to get a sense that you're not in Kansas anymore.
Yeah.
You're not in the big city. It's different out there.
That's right.
And they have a totally different point of view.
Thanks for that. I want to make mention of a story quickly. A planned discussion of material Duval County Public Schools uses to teach students about reproductive health was pulled from the Monday night school board agenda. The district says it will create its own supplemental materials on sex education. Susan and Mandarin has been holding the entire show to comment on this. So go ahead, Susan, you're on the air.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yep, go right ahead.
So I would like to know if the school board can put the supplemental material back on the agenda. The textbook and the supplemental material together meet state standards. This is the facts. The textbook and the supplemental material together satisfy state standards. The textbook was approved at the August 2nd board meeting. The vote on the supplemental material was delayed until September 12th. And then on September 12th at 3 o'clock in the afternoon before the meeting, Dr. Green pulled the supplemental material and decided that the district would produce their own material. But she did not do it because the supplemental material didn't meet state standards. She did it to appease a bunch of outspoken people who don't want sex ed taught in the classroom anyway, or so that's how it appeared when I listened to the public comments. So anyway, my question is, can the school board put that supplemental material back on the agenda? Thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead, Claire.
And it's a very interesting move to want to stop having sex education in schools. We know that taking sex education out of schools will lead to an increase in teen pregnancy and STDs and STI infections. So really, what is the argument for this beyond just this sort of puritanical idea that children shouldn't be taught the realities of how conception occurs?
Now, the reevaluation of the curriculum is due to a revision in state law, which requires each of Florida's 67 school boards to approve every year all supplemental materials for sex ed. More about this story on our website at wjctnews.org. But one other big talker from the week, let's spend a minute or two on this. The city is looking to boost its financial support for an organization with ties to 2 city council members. It's the Northeast Florida Fire Watch Council. They work to stop veteran suicides. This organization has had ties over the years with 2 councilmen, Nick Howland and Rory Diamond. Now, the city's lead attorney, General Counsel Jason Teal, says that the funding for the Fire Watch Council is going to a governmental organization, not a nonprofit. We also need to point out Rory Diamond won support last year for legislation that says all city funds awarded to nonprofits must go through a competitive evaluation process. but already there's a workaround causing criticism. I want to go to Jack Webb for this as our former city council president, and we are so pleased to have you as a regular panelist. You know, Jack, critics say there are basically two sets of rules for nonprofits in Duval County. If you're just a regular schmo, you've got to go through a very difficult competitive bidding process to get city grant money. But if you have connections, you can basically work your way around that process and get money for whatever cause that you like. If you've got the right person on the Jacksonville City Council on your speed dial, you know, you can get over. And this has been a sore point for a long time, particularly since multiple city council members are themselves heads of nonprofits and have been awarded money that seemed to go outside the competitive bidding process. Now that you're off this body, what are your thoughts about the criticism?
I think it's legitimate. I think it's valid. I mean, as you say, if you're an ordinary schmo, you've got to jump through a bunch of hoops, whereas if you're an elected schmo, you really don't only have to get the necessary votes on council.
Not that we're calling them schmoes, but go ahead.
Yeah, I'm a recovering schmo. But if you have connections to, to a lobbyist or a council member, then, that's kind of like the middle group there. I think that if there is a competitive bidding process that's objective, and we adhere to the proper procedure, and any individual who might have a connection or has some sort of not even special monetary or pecuniary gain from the operation of the entity, but even if it's more tenuous, I think there just needs to be a declaration of that, and abstaining not only from a vote on the matter, but to just staying away from it. Keep the moth away from the fire, and everyone will be fine. But yeah, again, there seems to be a little, shall we? Yeah. It doesn't seem to be the most objective, fair process. And, where's the Ethics Commission? I mean, where's their opinion on this? Are they recommending any additional local ordinance that might address the situation? So, I don't think it looks good, especially in the last budget process where, it's like, hey, everyone raise your hand. You want this, you want this, you want this for your favorite nonprofit. That's just not appropriate.
Thanks for that perspective. So, folks, we discussed so many stories. We couldn't get them all in. That's why we go around the horn and see what else might have caught our panelists' attention this week. Yes, it's our lightning round. Let's get into it. I'll start. The late actor Paul Sorvino, who was much loved, spent his final days in our area. I don't know if you knew this. Being treated at Mayo Clinic. And it turns out he shot his last film right here in Jacksonville. It's called The Ride, and it has its debut Saturday in San Marco at the 5th Annual Southeast Regional Film Festival. So go check that out. That's just one of a lot of things going on. Let's talk about a few other things on our radar this week. Raymond Troncoso.
Today is actually the first day of arguments in federal court for a lawsuit against the city council districts that were drawn. There are allegations that they're basically racially discriminatory against black residents in Jacksonville. So a federal judge is going to hear arguments in that case today. Thanks for that. Fred Matthews, what's in your world?
Nice shout out I'd like to give today. It's in today's Times Union. The Order of La Florida Award is being given to Greg White Sr., a longtime resident down in St. Augustine. Those he has done after-school programs for children underserved in his community, helped build playgrounds. He's just given immensely of himself over the last 20 years that I've known him and beyond that. So Greg White Sr., congratulations on winning the Order of La Florida Award created by the city in 1975. And it's just a great guy to get it and a great award to have.
That's fantastic. Thank you for that. Claire Goforth.
Okay, well, let's go with something positive, right? The Jacksonville Jaguars have their home opener this weekend. I know people were disappointed by last week's loss, but I personally was not. One, I'm a Washington fan, and two, I thought we saw much better play on the field than anything that I saw last season out of the Jags. So go out, get hot and sweaty, and watch the Jags hopefully bring home their first win of the season.
And the mayor is even encouraging everyone to wear teal today and post pictures on social media using the Duval hashtag to support the team this weekend. Jack Webb.
Claire is so positive and Fred's so positive. I hate to be a Debbie Downer on this one, but as I said, I got to jump back into politics for a second. And Fred made the comment before, when you start heading out of the big city, things change radically. Well, that's the same thing up here in New York. I'm outside of Syracuse, New York, and you get out in the country, and it's a different world. It's just a different world. And I will tell you, I'm making a political call right now for the gubernatorial race in New York, and I'm calling Zeldin over Hulsel by a 0.5 percentage point after a recount. So write it down.
We will keep that one in mind, and if you're proven right, we'll replay this bit of audio.
I look forward to it.
And I want to, and thanks for calling in all the way from the Empire State, by the way. Thanks,
my pleasure.
Thanks to everyone, Jack Webb, Fred Matthews, Raymond Troncoso, and Claire Goforth. Have a great weekend, guys. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, Melissa.
Thanks, Melissa. Bye-bye.
In a moment, music, and more music as we talk about the Florida Chamber Music Project's 10th season opening this weekend, and local artists. It's their turn to shine inside JME, our Jacksonville Music Experience. We'll take a listen right after this. Don't go away.
Baptist Health is a proud supporter of First Coast Connect with Melissa Ross. Baptist Health, committed to building a healthier community for all of us. More info at 202-4YOU or baptistjacks.com. Congaree & Penn, dedicated to agriculture and culinary endeavors, offering field-to-fork dining and outdoor experiences on over 300 acres. Sip, dine, explore. Information at congareeandpenn.com.
This week on Science Friday, 60 years ago, JFK said that we go to the moon not because it's easy, but because it's hard. Is it still?
It's still hard. The physics hasn't changed, and so there's still danger. I wouldn't say that it's any easier than Apollo. I would say we've learned a lot, and we're going to apply those lessons.
Waiting for the problematic launch of Artemis 1 on Science Friday from WNYC Studios.
This afternoon at 3, here on WJCT News 89.9.
On the next Fresh Air, Matthew Mcfadden. He won an Emmy Monday as Best Supporting Actor for his performance in the HBO series Succession. He plays Tom Wambsgans. Many Americans also know him for his performance as Mr. Darcy in the 2005 film Pride and Prejudice. Join us
today at 1 on WJCT News 89.9.
There hasn't been a railroad strike in America since 1992. What do we know about a new deal to keep it that way? Also, a bad inflation report sends stocks into a spin, and the jazz world remembers a pianist whose shows always included, in his words, a few butt shakers and toe tappers. More on the Friday News Roundup next time on 1A.
Today, starting at 10 on WJCT News 89.9.
Welcome back. Well, the Florida Chamber Music Project opens its 10th season Sunday at the Beaches Museum Chapel. Now, a decade ago, they kicked off their first season with a piece commissioned from Piotr Shevchik, violinist at the Jacksonville Symphony. The 10-year celebration features a new commission from him as well. Here's Piotr and violist Susan Pardue, one of the organization's founding members.
The first piece we ever played was a world premiere by Piotr, and we decided that a good way to kick off our 10th season would be with another world premiere by him and also another Beethoven string quartet.
Springtails is a string quartet in 3 movements, and this piece will take the listeners on a fun and wild ride. The piece has a lot of energy, excitement, humor, but also some drama, introspection, and a groove, and it is influenced by Polish folk music, American blues, jazz, and minimalism. So there's a little bit of everything in it.
Piotr Chevchik is just an amazing talent, folks. He composed the original theme for this show at one point, and I really encourage everyone to check this out. It's a chance to see a master at work. Get your tickets now for the Florida Chamber Music Project's season opener. Go to flchambermusic.org. Speaking of music, finally this hour, what is on the turntable this month at our own JME? I spoke with Matt Shaw of the Jacksonville Music Experience.
I wanted to start with Bad Madonna, which is the solo project of Alexis Rhodey. A couple months back, she released the EP Velvet Glove, which we played here on DJ Sessions. That EP is comprised mostly of singer-songwriter-y country folk type tunes. Well, less than 6 months later, the second Bad Madonna EP is out. It's called Iron Fist, and it features a full rock band production, much grittier, much heavier, has this kind of Pixies, soft, loud dynamics with droning guitars, lots of distortion. So yeah, I want to play a song, Jaded, from Bad Madonna's new EP, Iron Fist. Let's listen to a bit of that.
I hope what you have to say impresses me. It's been 2 weeks and I'm sleeping fine.
Nice. Now, is Bad Madonna a reference to Madonna as in Madonna,
the Queen
Louise
of Pop?
Ciccone?
Yeah, I have this thing where I don't like asking bands about their band name and the origin story because they end up being kind of boring. And with bigger bands too, it's like a Wikipedia search away too. So if you're really interested, Wikipedia is your source. But staying kind of in the indie rock world, the next one I want to play is by a group called Bedford Chords. This is a band that's been quite active lately, performing often at some of the coolest local venues. Their 2021 EP, Ode to Mallory, flew under our radar, but we're certainly glad we found it. The group has a very 90s shoegaze thing going on, very lo-fi. Think Galaxy 500, one of my favorite bands of all time. I want to listen to the single, It's Nice. It's a very minimal number, and it is very nice. This is It's Nice by Bedford Chords.
It's nice when you had some time. It's fine. It's nice when you had time. It's fine. It's nice. We're fine most of the time.
And this is a self-described piece of music from a Duval analog lo-fi bedroom band. And that's cool because there are so many talented bands and musicians in this community doing just that. Like they're just making amazing music and trying to get it out to a bigger audience.
You see a lot with artists these days that, the influences, it's kind of boundless these days. Like everybody kind of from this generation has grown up listening to everything, and you think like streaming services offer the entire history of recorded music at your fingertips. So it's cool to see like people just digging into different sounds, and we definitely have an eclectic scene here in Jacksonville. Speaking of which, Jacob Hudson is a St. Augustine singer-songwriter. He's had a busy 2022, a couple of new singles out, foreshadowing a full length due out in October. It's folky with tasteful production, subtle instrumentation, and this like cinematic songwriting. The lyrics are super interesting. It really drive the material. The song To Get Away recounts a tale of international subterfuge, as far as I can gather, with Hudson's road-weary vocals over sparse percussion, a piano figure, and a handful of dexterous, eclectic guitar licks. Let's hear To Get Away by Jacob Hudson.
Stopped at the gate, taken to a windowless room, filling out paperwork, saying I've been here since birth.
3 amazing cuts. And you know, Matt, you and the JME team are doing such amazing work at jacksmusic.org. Let's also point out, if you listen to The Independent, 89.9 HD4, you hear local artists, the only radio station in town that incorporates local talent into the big national playlists.
Right, yeah. We've got the best new music, I would say, and at 20 minutes after the hour, every hour we play a local artist. We also have live performances from both our JME soundstage and in-studio performances with local artists, regional artists, national artists. So it's a great way to discover new music, and we like to say, listen and discover something new to love.
Check it out at jacksmusic.org. And join me today at noon for the Florida Roundup. Co-host Matthew Petty and I will round up the biggest stories around the state this week. That's the Florida Roundup today at noon. I'm Melissa Ross. Thanks so much for being with us, and have a great weekend.
Trying to board a plane, stopped at the gate, taken to a windowless room, filling out paperwork, saying I've been here since birth. I don't speak much Portuguese.
Support for First Coast